Before I get started, I just want to say thank you to AWS and its student societies for organizing this event. Myself is an AWS professional member. I'm actually getting a lot out of my membership through my professional career, be able to connect with like-minded finance professionals, and also sharing the stories we learned along the ways. I would love at the time when I was in uni, there was such student society organizing events like this. So really thank you guys. Let's get into it. So a little about myself. I graduated from Bachelor of Commerce from University of Melbourne. And then I moved to Sydney, did Master of Finance part-time while I was working. First 8 years of my career, it's mainly around the traditional finance industry. I worked for JP Morgan, Australian Ethical Investments, Morningstar Investment Management, and then the last 3 or 4 years, I kind of transitioned to fintech industries. So has been worked on a few interesting projects, including robo-advice, building a smart chatbot, like building a wealth management platform, and most recently, I'm working on a project and building investment research platform. Myself, I'm a CFA charter holder since 2012. So that's basically about my background. And what's actually one of the important things, the reason I share my background here is more like I want to show that I'm probably like everyone, most of you here is more of accounting and finance background. I don't have computer science degree. I picked up programming about 4 years ago. So with a bit of help and some great passions, I'm sure everyone can do it. Everyone can learn this programming without actually going to an engineering degree. I'm going to share the first the story of how I actually met Python for the first time. So that was 4 years back. I kind of working late at work. It's a dark and a romantic night. I'm having great fun with my Excel spreadsheets. I'm sure that's like most of you finance grads and doing all your assignments with Excels and building all these nice models. But sometimes at a certain point, it just went all wrong. Like I got too much data being sucked into the files, and the formula just keep refreshing in terms of calculating. I'm sure it's probably got circular references somewhere. It's just a nightmare, and I have to do Control or Delete in terms of to get everything all started. So that's how I find man, I had enough with this. I need to find a better way to do it. So started learning a bit, doing a bit of research, and then I find Pythons and started learning it. So 4 years now, I'm still loving it. But in terms of this story, one thing more important is that I'm not say Excel is bad. It's more around what kind of problem you try to solve. I'm using Google Sheets and Excel all the times, every day as well. It's great tools, easy to share everything. But the only thing is that sometimes when you get to a large amount of data, and it's just not as simple and as easy to with some other tools. Which is also one of the projects I'm going to show everyone's views. Some of the programs, maybe we could think from a different solutions. Okay, so the next few slides, what I'm going to do is share a few tips in terms of I wish someone would told me at the time when I started learning Python. So these including some how to actually set up Python and some environment package management, and also some IDE to the tools could get you started quickly and save you lots of time while you're learning the actual programming side of things. So in terms of install Python, it's quite simple. That's python.org's website. Like here, as you can see, it detects my system as Mac. So I can just download it straight away. If you are on a Windows or Linux, and then you can find your source code from here as well. There are quite a few versions here. The ones I would recommend is if you only just get started, start with Python 3, because Python 2 is kind of legacy, and it's no longer supported by quite a lot of packages. So unless you're really working on a project require use some legacy code, and then I would recommend start with the latest versions, either 3.7, 3.8. Myself, I'm using Python 3.7. One of the reasons, just a few packages I'm using, it's only support to Python 3.7 at this stage. Like I say, for Windows, it's quite easy. Again, so you download your exe file and then install it from there. If you are on a Mac like I am, like so you actually have your Pythons come with your MacBook installed straight away, but it is Python 2.7. It's a bit outdated. What you can do is you can either go to this website, download this, and install from here, or you can just do brew install from your terminal. Brew install, and then you do Python, and then it's just going to upgrade your Pythons. In terms of how to get to the terminals, like so you actually can just search for terminals here. So if you are on Linux kind of system like Ubuntu's, I'm sure you probably is way ahead with than everyone else in terms of programming. And the good thing about Linux is that it's got Python 3, it's pre-installed. So pretty much you don't need to do anything. You can get started straight away. Once we have Python installed, another thing, what I find quite useful is in terms of managing your environment and your package. Like say, when I started, I have no idea about environments of anything. I pretty much install all my packages like in one base environment. To those ones like do not know what packages is, like it's more of like a library, or like think as a software or a piece of code written by someone else. So you can simply install it, import it, and use it in your code rather than writing everything from scratch. So like say so I would recommend you have some sort of environment management system and a package management system. So it helps you actually to do that. It's actually helped a lot once you really go deep into the learnings, because when you have several projects going on at the same time, you will have a version nightmare if you just install everything in one base environment. Some ways, some like programs like I recommend in terms of you to manage all the environment and package, including the virtual env, that's to manage your environments for Python, and the pip, which is if you install from the website I just show you, it will install the pip straight away. So this is basically the use pip, you can pretty much install all the programs and the things shared by someone else. Think as App Store for Python. So what these two program is doing that separately for environment and package. Like say, if you don't want to do that, I actually recommend to use pip env. So I have a site here which you can have a read about it. But basically what it does is it's merging the environment management and packaging management in one software. And you don't need to actually worry about creating a virtual environment. When you pip install, it's going to create an environment for you and install that package for you at the background. So very smooth and just one line of code, very easy to do. In terms of how to install it, if you are on Mac, you can do brew install, or if you already installed Pythons, and what you can do is do pip install, pip invent, as you can see from my terminal here. So that's really good, but make sure that you have your Python and pip installed before you actually try to install pip invent. Next thing is Jupyter Notebook. I think Robert already mentioned something about Jupyter Notebook. It's interactive code development. It's very easy to use, and it's actually not just for Python. You can use it for R, Julia, Scala, and many other programming languages. So very easy to set up as well. Like once you have your pip env installed, you just do pip install notebook, and it will install Jupyter Notebook for that particular Python environment. And in terms to start it, very easy. Run this command, and it will get it started. I'm actually going to have two examples of notebooks example to go through some Python basics with you. So we'll go into a bit more details on Jupyter Notebook. PyCharm. PyCharm is another IDE, which is in terms of going to help you a lot in terms of once you get a bit further in terms of learning Python, you writing your own script or your own kind of program to doing certain kind of things. It helps a lot in terms of, for me, when I get started. It's very easy to get set up, and it's great in terms of debugging. Say, I'm going to show you one of the scripts I actually literally put up in about 40 minutes a day, say on Thursdays. And I'm going to show you how to step through this code and how to actually use PyCharm. And it's just so powerful. And the good thing is the community version is free. So just go to this site, download the versions for your operating system, and you are good to go. So now we have Python and all the tools kind of set up. So how we actually started learning Python. I started learning Python 4 years back, when I was doing still a pure accounting grad, says, all I knew is Excel and a bit of VBAs. I never heard about Pythons, no other language says, but says what I find is some of these learning journey probably going to help you a lot is if you also coming from this background. Says first thing I recommend is do a Python 101 course online. There are so many of these courses out there online, and most of them actually free. So go there, do 1 or 2 courses, and it will get you, say, more familiar with some a computer programming side of things, especially if you're not from that background. The one thing was, say, when I started is that back then there wasn't as much as a resource as you can see these days. So I think I remember back then when I started, I did this Udacity course. It is back then it's probably 3 weeks, and now it looks like it's a 5 weeks program now. It break up the learning into separate pieces. It's talking about the Python, some data structures, and give you some a little task and project to do as well. And also you're going to learn quite a detail about the libraries and the Python module stuff. I'm going to go through some of these, like say in one of the notebooks I'm going to share with everyone. But again, like say, because of time, like don't expect you know Python in 1 hour. So, and don't worry, like say all these things is online. I'm going to share the like say the actual source code with you. So you can just try out yourself. But again, like say after these sessions, go find a 101 course and like say just go crack on it, and it won't take much time. And especially like now, I guess everyone's kind of at home doing social distancing. It's actually a good opportunity in terms of to catch up with some learning. So you can actually sit down in front of your computer and go through some of these things. And most of the other time, you probably have other commitments, but now there's really no other excuse. You are there at home yourself. Uh, so yeah, like say the uh, Udacity, Coursera, Udemy, Data Camp, and even YouTube. You'll find loads of free resources out there. Uh, One thing I recommend is that don't do them all. You won't have time unless you're really bored. Uh, Quite a lot of these are very similar. So pick one or two and like say get yourself started to like say have some ideas about the language itself and computer science like programming, like very brief understanding will help you get started. And then the next things I find is really important is that then just go start learning by doing solving some real life problems. And so you can start a real life projects no matter which industries and what kind of stage of career you are. Like if you students, you probably have assignments and doing data analytics in Excel. Try that with Python. Try that with Pandas. If you're still learning market portfolio theories, you can use Python to build a portfolio optimizers and just looking at some asset class allocations. If you already started work, and I'm sure there's so many things you can actually get Python to help you out with automation and some analytics. So yeah, so the best ways for what I learned is just go straight into it, learn along the way. Uh, if you don't know anything, don't worry. No one is born with this knowledge. No one was born with computer science degrees. You just need to spend some time and to just sit down, some patience to learn to yourself. And anything you don't know, just Google it. That's basically what I did. It actually helped a lot. Like say, uh, what I find is if you just try to learn it and use it to solve some problem, use these tools, you don't actually need to spend 4 years, 3 or 4 years to actually get engineering degrees. Like say, unless you really want to go to that industry, but more like say if you just want to use this as a tool to help you as daily work, and then just like learn on your spare times and do a bit of Google. One thing I would recommend is set up a GitHub account. So here's GitHub is pretty much is you can install, like say you can upload all your code and you can share with the rest of the world, or you can just make it private. It's really up to you. But the good thing is that you can keep track of your learnings and keep track of what you have done. It's great because like say, it's also as confidence after say 6 or 12 months of learning, and then you're coming back and see how far you actually learned. It's really encouraging in terms of get you push forward, and also very helpful in terms of like say if you're going to work in the tech industry, you got to have a GitHub account or some kind of account to hosting your projects, because your future employers will want to see that and will to want to see some of the things you've done. Like say as these I guess Python or R or any sales like a sort of tools getting more popular in finance industries, And this is going to add a bit edge in terms of your resume comparing to someone else don't have that experience, no projects done. You can just go there to your employer, say, have a look at these projects I've done, and I've done these analytics, and you can go check out. That's going to add quite a bit of bonus points if you compete with someone else with no that knowledge. So that's pretty much like say in terms of the actual learning. I think I can pretty much stop here. So like say, basically that's it. Like say, you can just go away and start learning yourself, like say at your own speeds and find the best way to for you. I have some recommended tools and I have some like guidance, but then like try to follow this, but don't try to say that I have to stick with these plans. The thing is that you'll find the best way to suit you, and like everyone's different. You'll learn from the different speed. Don't worry, like says, eventually you'll be able to actually do all these things, like say, just like everyone else. So in terms of everything about today's I'm going to share is actually in my GitHub account, which is I just showed you here. I'm going to post this in the chat. Oops, can't really share it. Try again. Here you go. So pretty much you can just go there, either git clone it or download it. I have a README here to get you started. So install Python, just like one of the slides I showed you guys. Install pip env, and then you go to this folder, you run this command, and then that install all your packages. And then you can just follow through these steps, and then everything I'm sharing with you today it's all here. So don't worry if there's some things like say you can't catch up with, because conscious of time, we don't have time to go through every lines of code. But what the most important thing is that just sit back and relax and say I go through some of these notebooks and some of these things, and don't get to struggle with like try to replicate right now. Like you probably going to miss out more important information. But like I said, because everything's up there, what you can do is just follow these steps and do this at your own spare time. I promise I'll keep these things up there at least for like the next 5 years. And I'm going to update it if anything I've said will change, will help to you, your learnings. So you'll get the updates like by just pull the latest things. So yeah, so let's just get started with some of these sections I outlined here. So basically for the rest of the, I guess we have about another like a half hour or 40 minutes. We'll go through 3 sections of things. In terms of first, I'm going to share you with like some basic Pythons. And like say, you probably much, this is a kind of condensed version, what you learn from some the Python 101 course out there. So don't feel pressured if you don't really understand it. Because I do really recommend you after these sessions, you go there to find a 101 course and start it, spend some time and learning yourself. So the second part, what I'm going to do is using Python to do some data analytics. So pretty cool and very exciting. And also this is one of the example you can't really do that in Excel. The last part of what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to explain one of a quick like a script I wrote a few days ago. And so I'm going to show you how to use PyCharm in that section as well. So you can actually see how to use PyCharm, how to debug your code. And most importantly, like say, getting these things kind of how to set it up on your machines, and then you can just go there to learn at your spare times. So the third part pretty much is is using Python to like write a script and doing some real life problem solving. So, okay, let's get started straight away. Again, I'm in my terminals. You can say is I'm in this how did I learn Python. So you can either download these folders or you can git clone if you you know how to do version management. But don't worry if you don't know, just download it, unzip it, open up your terminal, and then set it into this folder. Do pip install, and then once it's completed, just run the 4 steps. That's going to get you started the Jupyter Notebook. And the bang, so we are in Jupyter Notebook, so we all set. So here's, because I started the notebook, the Jupyter servers found that folder, so you can actually see all the files here. Before I actually go into the basic Python sections, quickly explain some of these files. What do they mean? These pip file and the pip log file, this is what you do when it's set up automatically by pip events. So don't worry about it. Once you do the install and it's created this file automatically. One thing should note in terms of pip files is that if you are on a different versions of Python, say if you're on 3.8, I'm here on 3.7. All you need to do is go to that file and change that to 3.8, and then you're good to go. So that's these 2 files. License, don't worry about it. This is just an open source license agreement. I'm sharing this for free with every one of you. README, it's have basically what you say here in terms of some instructions. And these 2 Jupyter notebooks, I'm going to go through with you one by one, some basic Python and data analytics. And then there's also Python file in terms of I wrote a few days ago in terms to just solving some real life problems. This data set is pretty much all the data I'm using for one of the Python Jupyter notebooks. Okay, so let's dive into this. So once you click into it, it's going to open up another tabs of your browsers. So it's literally many lines of Python code you can actually run here from your browser rather than from a black background terminals someone might actually get scared of. So you basically can write your Python's code literally here. So interactively as well, very powerful, very useful. Like what I said, you can use it for other programming language, which is if you're interested, you can like do your research on yourself. But basically how you actually run this, you can actually click a button on the top by just run that line of code. Here is just some text, so it's not going to do anything. So these lines is actually some Python code. Another way to run it is do the shift to shift and enter. So that's actually going to shift and enter. That's actually going to shortcut rather than actually click that buttons. You're going to write run that lines of code. So let's get started with the first line of code. Probably you see with every programming language is print hello world. And for Python is simple as parenthesis hello world. That's it. That's easy. And if you want to try something else, hello team, and you run that line of code, it print out the output straight away, just next below it. So that's very useful in terms of, especially when you just started learning, and it's great to to play around with the code. So next part, I'm just quickly going through some variables and the data types within Python. So what's a variable? Variable is pretty much a place you store your data, which can use later. So here's, you can see this line called, I'm install a text string with temp to this variable called my name. And then later on, I can pretty much just use it with other line of code rather than actually how to use team. And then I can just use my name, that variables. So here you go. I can rename it with something else. Hi, I'm Tom now. So, and with Python, you can assign these variables simultaneously. So here's, I have a separate by comma. So you actually assign these two text strings to A and B at the same times. And again, you'll see that the printout on your screen. Next part, I'm going to quickly go through some basic data types within Python. So that's broadly, there's a few of these data types. You have your string, pretty much just some text. You have two kind of numbers types, one integers and one floats. Integers are pretty much your whole numbers, and floats, which is your numbers with decimals. And also some booleans, which is just true and false. So in terms of actually to find out what data type that variable is, you can use type and parentheses. That's just going to print out the type of that data set. So here you say that some string I assigned to this variable. So you'll say the data type as string and the same as integer and the float and as booleans. One thing to note is these variable names are really arbitrary for you to say to understand, but I could assign pretty much anything to that variables. So here I'll assign number 6. So it is a whole number, it is integer. But if I put a quote around it, a quote is the ones when you actually want to assign a text to a string. So here's, if I want to assign number 6 as a text, and I'm going to rerun this line of command, and you actually see that it is changed to string now. So that's how you find out the type of the variables, and you can also change the type of variables with typecasting. So think typecasting is some functions. Actually, you can change variable types for if you want to change some data to string, and you simply do strings parentheses. And so here's, you can actually say I've assigned a whole number to a variable A, but when I actually print it out, it's actually say A is actually a string. Why? Because I actually had a conversion here with my strings typecasting. So for the ints, integer and float, it's very simple. Int parentheses and float parentheses, and put your arguments in, and that's going to change your variable type to the ones you want to set. So here's, for example, first I've assigned, let's try something else. Let me assign a decimal place to these variables B, and you can see it is a float, it's a decimal. But here I do some mutation, I do some I apply a function like a typecasting to these variables, and then let me find out, see, it actually changed the type of that variable. And then if I print it out, it's actually changed from 1.56 to 1. So again, if you try to typecasting a float to integers, it's kind of just a convert, just getting the actual, the whole number part of that decimal, and then reassign back to that variables. Okay, some operations you can do with all your variables. So very simple math calculations. You have plus, minus, and you can go through all these at your spare time when you play around with these notebooks. I can change this, and you can actually see the number getting changed as well. And it's actually a good way to just say how the things do. So print out, write something here, print out the results. Another thing is that you can actually, if you want to actually add some lines in my notebook, feel free to do that. All you need to do is see the plus buttons up there. That's just going to add another line here. And then within here, what you can do is you can pretty much write anything. It's just going to run Pythons. You can do some math calculations. There you go. So we say some operation for the number of types, and then you can actually apply the operators to text string as well. So that's very powerful with Python. So here's, I assign hello, these are text string to this message. And, but I can literally plus these two together. So what is going to do is it's just going to concatenate, it's just going to append and join these two words, two text strings, one after another. And another cool thing is that you can just do hello two, and then just going to print it like the joins twice. And if I do hello four, and you say just going to, it saves the time for you actually to do all these writing that one by one. And some other very useful function in terms you can find out the length of the text strings, and it's pretty much similar with the length function in your Excel. So here's hellos being assigned to message, and then I can say there's 5 letters in that string. And you can slice in that string as well. So be minded that Python is 0 index. What does that mean is everything starts with 0 when you count. So it's 0, 1, 2 rather than 1, 2, 3. So here's, I try to find this actually is the second letter within these text strings. And so that's actually E there. So if you try to find the first letters, easy, just put 0 there. Here you go. You can do slicings, and think this as like right left functions of your Excel. Here's I'm pretty much just slice the third letters to the last. So there you go. And if I want to do the fourth to the last, and you can play around with this code. It's very simple. Here's, I try to have a subsection of the text string as well. So get my second letter to the second last, and you can do, try to get the middle two. And also you can do, this is pretty much your right, your left functions get the left two letters. So that's the operator for string. And how about we apply some operation for number and string? You'll get error message because it doesn't make sense to Python. If you try to add a text string to a number, like I said, there's no calculations in terms of what these will end up with. You'll get type errors. So that's basically data types and some operators. Then let's go to some data structures. So first is a list. So a list in Python, like say, think that a variable, if its variable is one place, you're holding one piece of data. List is like one place, so you can hold array of data, so multiple pieces. How do you create a list? Very simple. You do a variable and you use square bracket, and then you can pretty much assign your variable, your value here and separate with commas. And so simple as this, you now create a list. List is very powerful, and list is order. So you can literally find, like say, against Python is zero index. So here's, I'm trying to find the second items in my list here. So the second item is February. So if I try something else, against, you'll get nice. So that's pretty much 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the last items in the array, in that list. So the length of the list is 5, and all the thing is that you can change the value for existing list by simply the list, put the indexing there and assign with equal signs, and then just your new value. And so here's, I'm assigned the second value of my list to December. And now I'm printing it out. See the difference? It has changed the second item from February to December. So that's a list. And then we go to tuples. Tuples is pretty much a list with a special feature that you can't change anything within that array. So how to create a tuple? You simply use a parenthesis instead of square bracket. So here's, I'm creating amongst tuples, and it is a tuple. You can slice in the tuple just as you do with the list. I'm finding the first tuple is Zhang. But one thing is, like say, the tuple, you can't change any of these values. Once it's created, that's it. You can't change it. So I'm trying to do this same operation like what we did here with the list. Then said you have an error message because it doesn't assign reassignment. So that's list and the tuples. And then we have another data structure as sets. So sets, again, similar to the previous tools. Slightly different in terms of it's unordered, and also it removes duplicates. In terms of how to create, like you use a curly bracket. So here's, I'm trying to creating a set in Python, and you can see here, I'm actually have quite a few different repeating values here. Like say January is repeated, and I got February, and I got May here. So let's see what's going to do here. So I'm creating a set, but then when you're actually printing out the set here, so you actually see that all your duplicates can get removed automatically. And one thing to note is that it's not ordered for set. Dictionary just as the way it sounds, it is think as a dictionary as you normally use to look up some things. Like say, it is a way to store your key value pairs. So how to create a dictionary in Python? You with the curly bracket. You start with your keys, like say, and then the columns, and then your actual value for that keys. And then you separate with comma, so you can, so here I have 3 key value pairs. So I'm creating a dictionary here, so for assign that to variable team. And then how to actually look up that dictionary, easy. You do variables, square brackets, and then you put your key for that dictionary, like you want to look up here. I have the last names as keys, and let's try that. Okay, print out my last names and try my first. Oops, you can't do that because there's no keys called team. So this is actually a value. You can only look up for your keys. So here, that works. So that's some basic data structure Python. And then let's quickly go through some like in terms of logics within the Python code, like says some conditions, true and false. If, like say, you probably do this in Excel spreadsheets when you're writing up your complex formulas, try to have all the conditions. If this, do that, else do something else, is pretty much the same. So here's, I'm just writing some code in terms of assign some Boolean variables, like two Boolean value to these two variables. And then I have some if conditions, and then it will print out things differently based on the condition. So because it's raining and it's cold, so it's asked me to bring umbrella and a jacket. So yeah, that's very lovely. How about we change it? So it's not raining, but it's quite cold out, yes. Okay, just get a jacket. What if it's not raining or cold? So, well, it's not satisfied with any of these three conditions, so it's will print out the last one here. So simple if condition and loops. In terms of the loops are some things you can use to like let it to repeatedly doing some things. There are a few ways to doing loops. You can do while loops. While loop, it will be repeatedly doing these things if these conditions satisfied. So here's I have a while loops in terms starting 0, assign that to a variable I, and then I'll assess the variable is less than 5. So if it is less than 5, I plus 1 and reassign to that variable, and then I print out something here. So it's going to, again, it's just going to doing that repeatedly. The thing very important is that when you design your program or the things, just make sure and watch out the infinity loops. Sometimes it could done on purpose. You want something running indefinitely forever. So that's fine, but otherwise, you might run into infinity loop. If I remove these ones, I'm going to run this, a bit scary, but then it's just going to repeat things so many times. Okay, let's see if I stop it on time. Okay, see, it's running so many times, and if you leave it there for a bit longer, it's just going to crash my memories and then crash my computer. So watch out for that. Yeah, so that's while loops, and for loops, you can actually loop through some things. A good thing with some of the data structure I introduced earlier, like this tuple set, is that you actually use that to manage your loop. So for loop is pretty much is you can loop through every single items in a list, in a tuple, or a set. Here's we'll create a list, and then I'm going to loop through every single item in that list here, and then I'm going to print it out. So that's that easy, 2 lines of code. You can loop through dictionary as well. As you probably remember, I had a dictionary assigned to a variable team, and then this is how you loop through a dictionary by key value pairs. So I'm going to loop through a dictionary. I'm going to print out all the key value pair here. Functions. Functions is think as just some code we wrote so we can reuse it later. So good thing about programming is that you don't have to write everything from scratch yourself. So most likely some things you can write once and then repeat it, use for yourself. And also the module and package I'm going to introduce very soon is something actually written by someone else, and then you can actually use it as well, and because it's shared with the rest of the world. So how to creating a function, you use div as define a functions, and then with function name. If you have a like argument you want to put into a function, you can put an argument here. Otherwise, you can just leave that as a blank here, something like this. But here's I have arguments to fit into this function, and then pretty much just print out hello. And so this function created. So now I'm just going to run this function to a text strings team. So hello team. Okay. Hi. Let's try something else. Hello world. Hello world. You can even put a number there. Hello 6. Hello my friends. Yeah, so you can write some other function doing some math calculations, define your functions, your input arguments, some logic here. This is simple function. Well, you can actually, if you have a lots of calculation here, you can do quite a lot of things here, and then you can just return that ending variables you need. So here's, I'm just creating a function plus two numbers together. Okay, that's a functions. Handy is to use later. So then that's some bigger piece of module and package you can think as organize a bigger structure of some more functions and data objects and things either you wrote yourself or written by someone else and shared. Like say you can actually reuse those ones rather than writing everything yourself from scratch. So how to use them? So simply you install them like from pip env install. So like the ones I show you in the README of these projects, you can go through that. But once you have that installed, you can simply use that that module or library. The package is simple as import, and here's I'm import random package, and then I'm generating some random numbers. So yeah, that's very nice rather than for me to write math functions to generating these myself. There's so many there's so many cool packages out there, so you can actually explore. So there's a interesting one called Wikipedia. So basically, you can look up things, and then it's actually returning the Wikipedia summary. Like say here is return summary. It's actually return the whole page, and then you can just print out the things you need and probably use it for something else. So I have that installed earlier on. I'm going to, okay, that's cool. So that's something showing up on the Wikipedia. So let's try something else. Let's say the COVID-19. I'm not sure if it's updated in Wikipedia, probably is. Let's say what's going to print out. Okay, cool. That's yeah, like very handy. If you want to do some interesting things, play around with the code, feel free just play around with the notebook. There's another interesting package I find quite interesting is you can actually print out the emojis from notebook as well. So here's I import it. I do a thumbs up. Cool. So I can do some other things like it's Easter. Yeah, happy Easter, everyone's. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for these ones. And so it's just going through the basic Pythons. And you will get all these once you actually started doing a Python 101 course. So let's move on to the next notebook, Python for data analysis. This one is actually quite a heavy one. I'm just going to quickly go through it, like say, don't worry if you won't be able to catch up with this, like say, because everything is up there, so you can just download it and run it at your spare time. Like say, so I'm actually borrow this code from Wes McKinney's his inventors he's a creator of pandas. For those of you that don't know pandas, you can Google for Python pandas, and then the first one showing up, like say, basically it's a like panel data. Think as like a data frame, or in other words, think as tabular data like Excel. So you can actually doing data analytics with pandas. It's very powerful, and that's what I'm going to show you with this use case. Yeah, like say I borrowed this code to credit to Wes McKinney, and he has a really great book, Python for Data Analysis. Very good if you're going to use a lot of Excels and analytics, and so highly recommend have read these books and go through some of the examples set up in the books. It's definitely going to help you a lot. I update some of the data for his example. So for these ones, basically, quickly first before we go into it, just going to high level of how these projects try to do. So it's going to do some analytics on all the baby names from 1880 to most quite recently 2018. And in terms of data set, so the actual data within that project shared here with you guys here on the data sets table. So it's actually a quite big data set. As you can see, each year I have a text files, and that's over 100 text files for all the data sets we're using. If we open up one of these text files, and let's have a look at, so that's actually 32,000 lines of data there. So it's quite simple data, like with your name, baby name, gender, and in terms of count, like how many babies with that name for that year. So, but even one file that has that many of data. So in terms of a whole lot of these files is actually, I think, around 2 million rows of data. So I guess like say, if you want to do something like this within Excel, you probably have to copy through all the data into Excel. Or if you're more high next level, you can write a VBA code to look through all these things and copy paste that. But again, you'll hit a limit in terms of like say, as I remember, Excel 2010 probably only handle something around 1 million rows. And if you have like 2 million rows, and you try to do pivot tables and you try to do analytics around that with Excel, that's going to be a nightmare. So that's back to what I talked earlier on. Like in terms of Excel is great for some problems. If you have very simple data sets you want to share with someone, especially someone with no programming backgrounds, and that's the best way to convey your message and to share your code. But if you have a problem like this, a huge amount of data, and you probably have to look for something else, and Pythons, and especially using Pandas is actually a good way to solve that. So, okay, let's go back to this code, and let's quickly run through this code. First, I'm going to import some package I'm using, which I installed earlier on. So I'm going to pandas, which I showed you earlier on. That's this pandas. I have NumPy doing some calculation, and then I have matplotlib to actually doing some graph plots. So importing that, so here is simply reading these text file to a variables, and then just do some exploratories, which we saw earlier on by opening up these text files straight away. So I'm opening the files. So that's names, the text, the gender, and the count of the baby's names. So we can do some simple calculations. So basically, this do some group by sex, and then do in terms of sum up in terms of this column, these counts of the births. So basically, I just give you the number of the female baby and the girls and boys point for that year. So that's a simple exploratory. Okay, back to how we feeding these over 100 of text file into Python and actually doing some analytics. So that's these lines of code. Not very long actually. And so I'm pretty much, I have a loop, for loop here. I'm looping through all these years. So that's going to replace all the actual, the year variables are going to be like from 1880 to 2018, and then it's just going to loop through all these text files and then raise that to a big data frames and then append to variables. So we saw that earlier on. That's like, say, over 100 files, and then let's try to write that in Python. See how long it takes. Okay, that's done. So easy as that. And let's print out the variable we just loaded. So that's actually close to what is 1.95 million rows there out there. So imagine if you do that manually, or even Excel, like say, just like say, it's just a nightmare. But here's with Python, like 2 seconds, we got the data loaded. Let's running some analytics. So some of this stuff is more around pandas. And so if you want to learn more about it, go to Pandas site and have a look at their books. And there's lots of notebooks out there which you can use. So here I'm just going to fly through the code in terms of, like, so you can see here, I'm actually creating a pivot table. So that's what you normally do in Excel. Let me just create another rows here so we can actually see the output of the pivot table here. Okay, cool. So I'm actually creating a pivot table with all the data, 2 million of data there. So what it's going to do is that it's just going to have your rows as your years, columns your sex, and then we have the sum of the counter baby. So here's we go. So that's what we say here is like say a pivot table for each years. And so we can plot this as easy as a plot. So very simple, just like you use Excel. And here's we're creating some function to calculating the proportion of the babies within each years. And then we apply that function to each year and the sex for that data set. And you can see that for married and names, that's 7% of the baby girls called Marys in 1880s. And then if we do a sum up, easy as this. So, well, of course, it's sum up to 100%. And then we do some calculation. We try to get the top 1,000 names here. So that's for all the over 100 years of history. So we now have the data. Let's do some analytics on these 1,000 names. So here's, again, I'm creating pivot table, and then I'm trying to analyzing the historical trend of these names and see how that names grow throughout the last 100 years. What you can say is that John's quite popular names, especially around baby booms, I guess. And Henry was quite popular early of the century. Mary, same as Mary's, but in terms of not so as what you see now. We can also have a look at the diversity of all the different names here by running these code, doing some analytics. Here's pretty much is looking at in terms of these 1,000 names and the percentage of that among all the populations. What you say at the start of the century, pretty much that 1,000 names cover 100% of your population. But here is now is only like 70, 80%. And people get more creative in terms of creating a very creative baby names. And what I find is interesting, if you look into the data set, there's actually Zeldas, like if you play Nintendo Switch, and then there's baby names called Zelda, which gets, well, I won't say popular, but started popping up in the data set since the launch of the games. So yeah, like say that's very simple. We can go through, like you can go through this at your spare times very easily, just running these through this code. Here's we can say in terms of the top 50% of population in terms of how many different names they have. Like say people got like really boring back then. So like say it's probably 10, like say 20 names will cover like say it's 50% of the population. Imagine that. But then now it's like say, God, that's like say for the boys that's over 100, and for the girls that's even more creative, like for the girls' names. And let's say some other interesting analytics. Here's it analyzing the last letter of the names. So we can say in terms of like say for the boys, the names are getting quite popular ending with N. But for girls, it's A is always quite popular throughout the last 100 years. Yeah, so that's pretty much it, like say in terms of these data analytics. So again, don't feel pressure to, if you don't really catch up with this, you can also go back and just running this by yourself. Very last, and we're going to just go through the PyCharms. So PyCharms as one of the things I recommend in terms of tool to develop on your own times. It's very easy to debug. Here I'm going to spend 5 minutes, go through this code and how to set up these debugging environments, and then you can go away and learn this all by yourself at your own speed. So I'm opening up PyCharms. Basically, you can open a project just by opening a folder in your directories. Here's I already have my these projects I downloaded earlier on, which is the ones you just saw I shared. So there's some files here we saw earlier on, so this is one of the scripts I wrote few days ago. So what this Python script to do is that it's going to go to Australian Financial Review website, and it's going to find out all the articles published on certain date, and it's just going to download all that articles and then export into like CSV files. So again, this script is only for education purpose. So please still use your subscriptions to read the news and to buy these things online. But again, I just want to show that other than data analytics, there's so many other things you can actually do with Python. And so here's, we have the projects opened up. First things you need to do is set up your interpreter. So if you use Mac, you go to your preference and otherwise settings for your Windows. And then you'll see there's one section called the project and project interpreter. And it's actually recognize my environment like automatically. If it's not do that with your computer, you can do add, and then you can actually say the pip env environment. So these all kind of integrated. So if you install your stuff with pip env, like say PyCharm will recognize it, and it's really seamless, like in terms of user experience. Here you can see all the packages installed within that environment. And then, okay, we all set have our interpreter set up. For beginners, like say, I strongly recommend to set up a debugging environment for your IDEs. Like say, you could run this Python code through command lines in your terminals, but then that's a bit hardcore for the beginner. But in terms of set up your new environments for debugging, very easy. What you do is repeat it. You go to the top right, you add these configurations, you add ones, click on Pythons, and then you just pretty much like find the script you want to run. Here's I already have one set up, which is simply just running the script I had for that scripting things to go to AFR site and getting all the articles. The good thing about once you have the debugging environment set up is that you can actually put in all the stop break points in your code. And this is a great way for a beginner to actually learn the code and see how the code is doing things. So you have this set up, and later on you can just go away with my code and have a look at how each line of code doing things. So to run it, you simply do this, like say the little buttons up to the top. You click on that, and that's going to run this script, and it's going to stop at these points of like say where you put the stop sign there. And what's amazing about this is that you can actually see at that point of time and what each variable is, and you can actually step through this line by line and see how things getting changed. And so if I'm here at these lines, and then if I go to here, so this is pretty much do a search for AFR sites, and I'm trying to finding articles as I guess was yesterday's published yesterday, and then it's gave me a list of articles. There are lots of articles there, so I limit to the top 10 articles. And then you can say that I get as URL list variables, I get a list with all the URL for that 10 articles. And then let's keep going through the code. So you can do that through your spare time, but basically the high level is that first it's search for all the articles published on that day. It gets a list of URLs, and then it's going to pass that list of URLs and getting a list of articles with the details in terms of the author, the summary, and even the full body of the articles, and then export that to a CSV file. So we keep going. So here's by the way, if you use PyCharms, and you can use either control click if you're on Windows, or you can do command clicks if you're on Mac. You actually go through that functions. Like says, if I'm want to look at what's past article list is, you can hold your command lines on Mac and then click into it, and then you can actually jump into that functions. It's really handy. So here's it's just going to go through all the articles, pass that, and then in the end, I'm actually getting a dictionary for articles with your URLs, title, published date, and all these things. So that gets stored in this, and then that dictionary is stored in another list. So if I keep going, I need to stop that. So now the finished past 10 articles, and then I'll say that the article list with a list of 10 dictionary with all their informations. And let's keep running the code. So that's all done. So 10 articles extracted, and let's go back to our folders. So that's your root directory of CSV file, and let's have that opened up. There you go. You have your URL, you have your title of the articles, the publishers, authors, and the actual full body of what's happening there. That's a summary. So here is a full body of what's happening there. So yeah, so that's how you set up PyCharm and to debug the code, everything. So yeah, like I think that's pretty much it for my presentations. And so you can do loads of more things and fancy things with Pythons, like say, all like say it can do automation. It's actually can creating website as well. It's lots of good things about it, depending on your use case. So feel free to go to these shared projects, have that download and play around at your spare time. And just be mindful. You will, I'm sure you will hit quite a bit of obstacles along the way while you're learning. And that's happened to everyone's. Like I had so spent hours of time just knocking my head against walls, try to get some things figured out. But once the learning curve actually started, once you actually like say after I guess like say a few weeks and to understand the basics programming, getting your mindset into that stage, and then you will actually pick up the speed very quickly. So again, all the best with your learnings, and we have Q&A sessions later on, and but again, like say, I have these projects here, and if you actually have any questions, and then you can actually just create issues or something here, and after you setting up your GitHub like projects account, and then I'm more than happy to answer your question here in terms of have it set up. Okay, so that's it, and I'll hand over to the host. Thank you, guys.